We hear about security breaches, data leaks, and cyber incidents all the time. But how do they happen in practice? How do attackers get in? How do they move in the network? How do they exfiltrate data and disappear without being detected? If you ever wondered these things, this video series might be just for you. I'll show you how we can use the MITRE ATT&CK framework to analyze the tactics, techniques, and procedures of real-world attackers. We're not going to learn how to hack. This is not a hacking tutorial, let's be clear about that. But this will give you a better understanding of the methods they use, so you can apply it to raise your awareness and protect your company or yourself. This first video will be an introduction to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. We'll look at the different stages of an attack. First, we should talk briefly about the concept of a kill chain. Kill chain is essentially a military term to define the structure of an attack. And it has 4 phases typically. Starts with the identification of the target. Then you dispatch forces to the target. You initiate the attack on the target. And you destroy the target. The idea from the defender's side of things is to break this chain as early as possible, stop the attack as soon as possible. So if we apply this concept to the digital world, we obtain the cyber kill chain. So in 2011, a US company called Lockheed Martin did just that. They created the cyber kill chain, which attempts to define the 7 phases of a digital attack. These 7 phases should be here now. It's recon, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and action on objectives. To better explain the 7 stages of an attack, let me draw you a very simple diagram. So on the left side here, I've put the bad guy, the hacker, the black hat hacker that is aiming to target a specific company, let's say. So on the right side, we have that target company. The first thing the hacker is going to do is try to get a better understanding of what the target company has out there on the internet. Let's say they find that they have a website and maybe they have an API exposed on the internet. And maybe they have a file server where they're hosting files for their employees or their clients. And maybe they have a mail server. They can even do some physical recon to find out where the company has offices, in which cities, which locations. And finally, they can use sources like LinkedIn to find a list of employees and find out how their emails could look like. All this to form a picture of the target company and find ways to attack them. This first phase is called recon. So once the attacker has performed the recon and has this clear picture and formed an idea on how they can plan their attack, they'll then move on to the weaponization phase. Weaponization is basically choosing how to target this company and creating the exploits or the malware that they plan to use. So in this example, let's say that this bad guy decided to create a malware and target the employees of this company. That brings us to the third phase, which is delivery. So they could choose to send spear phishing emails to target specific employees they believe that would open this malware that they're sending. That's step number 3. And number 4 will be exploitation. That is at the point where the employee receives the email, opens it, and runs the malware. And with exploitation will come step 5. Install. That's when the malware will install itself on the victim's machine and start to run. Now, one of the first things that the malware will then do is to establish a communication channel back to the attacker so that the attacker can start issuing extra commands. That's called the command and control channel, step 6. And once the channel has been established, then the attacker will move on to fulfill its objectives. So that could be, for example, exfiltrating sensitive files from the victim's servers. Step 7, exfiltration in this example. So this is good, but it has some problems. It's known to focus too much on the perimeter and on malware attacks. It's really missing other types of attacks, and it's a bit outdated, so it's not kept up with the latest in the threat landscape in cloud attacks, for example. It's also limited in the type of attacks, and it doesn't really go into any detail in the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures of the attackers. So now is a good time to introduce the MITRE ATT&CK framework and fill that gap. You could say that the MITRE ATT&CK framework is more like a knowledge base, like a catalog. Instead of phases, it uses tactics and techniques. It has 14 tactics, and each of them having multiple techniques. And each of these techniques also have sub-techniques. So how is this useful? Well, for companies, it's a way for them to catalog their defensive capabilities, to assess where they are and what they need to do. And for their security teams, it's a way to analyze the attacks that they might be seeing against their companies. We're going to use it in a different way though. For us, it's going to be a common language to talk about how we could be targeted, how we can defend ourselves, to help us talk about consequences and impact. And we'll do that with a first example now. On the left side of my screen, I have the official court report for a real case, the case of the United States of America versus a group of Iranian hackers called the Silent Librarian. These guys are accused of conducting intrusions to 144 US universities and then to another 176 universities in 21 other countries. And I think they've caused about $3.4 billion of damage just in the US. This is all from information from this report here. What's interesting is if you scroll down in this section, they start to go into details of how the attack was conducted. And what we're going to do is take the details in this report and translate them into the attack framework of MITRE. Before we do that, let's have a look. I just went to the Attack Navigator website, the URL of which you can see here. And once I'm here, I'll say create a new layer, enterprise, and it's going to give me this huge matrix of attack tactics and techniques. Tactics are here across this line. It ranges from recon activities to access, to discovery, to exfiltration, to impact. And each of these tactics have several techniques, as I mentioned, like recon having 10 techniques under it. If I expand it all, you will see that it's actually much more, because you have all the sub techniques. But for simplicity now, I'm going to collapse them all, so you see them here. I can also make them show their IDs. So when talking to someone else or looking up on the internet, it's usually easier to search for the ID here, like T1595, instead of the full name. But again, for visibility, I'm going to remove that now. And let's start from the report and we'll see how we can use this. So in section 4A, the first activity that they seem to have done would be online recon of university professors, determining their research interests and articles that they had published. So based on this data and looking through the recon phase, I'm probably going to mark this one, so gathering victim identity information, including email addresses and employee name. And I'll mark these as blue. Searching open websites, so they would search for social media and for search engines for information on these professors. So I'm going to mark these two. And they would also search on the university's website itself, so victim-owned website, the university's websites, to find stuff about those professors. So I think, based on my analysis, there is a bit of guesswork, of course. I'm marking these 5 things as their recon activities. Now, what I can do now, if I want to, is to right-click on any of them and say View Technique, which will take me to the attack framework's website, and which gives me lots of more information, examples, mitigation, how to prevent them and how to detect it, and references to examples where this is seen to happen. So I find this like a very good way to research more on these topics. Okay, let's collapse these and go back to the report to section B. Customized spear phishing emails, so let's keep that in mind, spear phishing, was created and then sent in order to obtain unauthorized access, yes. Including tricking the target into providing account login. So they were trying to steal account login credentials. Keep that in mind. They were looking to be sent from professors of another university to this university. So that means they were creating fake identities and fake email addresses, and probably even fake university websites even, maybe. And they were talking about articles they read, so that means their recon, as we just marked, was quite strong in finding things that the professors had written recently. If they clicked on the link, they would be taken to a domain that was named similarly to trick them into... Okay, so they were buying, they were using links and they were buying domains that looked similar. Let's think about resource development. So I'm going to expand all these here and see what kind of resources these guys had or obtained. Okay, infrastructure-wise, we talked about them creating fake university domains, and to host email and to host a website, they would have needed to purchase servers. So I'm going to mark these two domains and servers as parts of their activity to acquire necessary infrastructure. I'm going to mark this one because it said that they were emailing professors pretending to be from another university, so they must have created accounts, email accounts from that other fake university. So I'm going to mark this one. They did procure, I'm sure, like tools, or maybe they used open source, but open source or commercial, they would have purchased and used some capabilities, and they probably got like digital SSL certificates at least to host their websites and look secure. Then stage capabilities, link target. Let's have a look at this, what it says, view technique. Yeah, so that means putting in place resources referenced by a link. And in the report, it said they were linking, making professors click on a link that takes them to this website. So I think this is particularly relevant to them. And indeed, if you look at the procedure examples, you see Silent Librarian, which is the attackers we're looking at now. And it mentions the attack that we just talked about. So this one is also relevant for us. Oh, and also it did mention spear phishing. So that would go in this phishing section here under initial access. So how did they obtain their initial access? That was by conducting spear phishing attacks. And they were not sending an attachment malware. They were using a link. So this is the one specifically that they were using. Let's put them in orange. Continuing to read here, C. Then they use the account credentials to obtain unauthorized access. Then it talks about exfiltration of academic data and documents, journals, a lot of things, of at least 31.5 terabytes. So probably this went over a few months or a long time, so that they were discreet and did it over a long period of time. So exfiltration would come towards the end, so that it has its own tactic actually. Exfiltration is over here, and I don't know if it mentions the technique of exfiltration. I'm going to say exfiltration of a web service as an example, but we don't have enough detail to know how they exfiltrated it. So they could have transferred it to a cloud account like OneDrive or an S3. One thing to note is that once they perform their spear phishing link and obtain the user's credentials, they would have access to valid accounts. So if I mark this valid account as well, and I can see that it's highlighting the other places where this technique is, because valid accounts is both valid for for initial access, for persistence, and for privilege escalation. For me, I'm going to say that it's especially relevant for in this one, orange, because we're talking about persistence. Once they had this account, until the university became aware of the attack, they were able to continuously come back and log into this account. So they had a persistent access over there. So I can keep on doing this. Like if you scroll down a bit more here, actually, you see that in the other universities, non-US universities, they also use the method called password spraying. Now, if I don't know what password spraying is, I can search here, password spraying, and see, you come to this section, whoops, and you can say view, and there you go, you have all the information about what password spraying is. So it's a good knowledge base to learn about all these techniques, not to use them as a hacker, but to protect yourself against them. We're not going to do more on this report, but you can continue doing this analysis, and at the end, once you're done, you can actually download this as a JSON file to work on it later, or you can export it as a PNG or SVG, sorry, a photo that looks like this. That is useful. You can take it to your security team if you're in a company. You can continue working on it later, and so on. So that would be a simple way to use MITRE for this specific report. So I think this is really cool in that you can start to see a story here. You can now look at this matrix that you've built and see how the story unfolds itself. You can see that they first searched for victim-owned websites. They gathered information about the targets, the professors, their email addresses, their names. They looked on social media. They then went on to buy like domains and servers and email accounts, build these fake websites that then they used to create a link in their spare phishing emails to target these users. Once the users clicked on these links, they were taken to this page, which looked like a legitimate website, where they entered their credentials, and this way the hackers were able to log into the university accounts and exfiltrate terabytes of data. So that was a quick intro into the MITRE ATT&CK framework, just to give you an idea on how you could use it to analyze a real-world attack, or to use it in your company to understand where your defenses are strong or weak. I think what I want to do in the next video is focus on a specific tactic or technique, see how it could be used against us people, see how we could use MITRE to improve our awareness on these topics. So that's all I had for this first MITRE ATT&CK video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please press the like button below. Leave a comment on what you think I should talk about next in this series, and consider subscribing to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.